Doing this for the last decade or so has taught us a great deal about what people believe in the industry. Much of it is wrong. And we've kind of built our own model for how SEO works. And no one can be fully predictive of what Google will do, not even Google themselves. You can actually totally mess up someone's rankings by publishing irrelevant content to their website. And I see agencies make this mistake of publishing content just to get clicks. People have been way too focused on one search engine for too long, which is just Google. And now we're waking up and realizing, well, what about YouTube? YouTube is an incredibly powerful search engine that I believe AI can create human quality content without human review.
Hey Manick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Yusuf.
Really cool. Today we'll talk about a topic that I've used to work on in the past. It's called SEO, but SEO in 2025. So what has changed in the last years, months, and maybe even a decade? So we have an expert today on the show, namely Manick from SearchAtlas, if that's correct. So maybe give us a quick introduction. What are you doing at SearchAtlas and what is kind of your expertise? What are you working on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So SearchAtlas is a SEO automation platform. What we've been doing is essentially we look at ourselves as a research company. We've been studying the search engine for almost a decade now, rolling our sleeves up, running experiments. We work with, at our agency, a maximum of 100 clients. The reason we put a cap on it is that we're not trying to build the biggest agency in the world. We just want to pick the best, most interesting, complex 100 projects to work on so we can always learn and we can take our theory and our software and apply it with brands. So doing this for the last decade or so has taught us a great deal about what people believe in the industry. Much of it is wrong. And we've kind of built our own model for how SEO works. We call it holistic SEO, and we use a framework that's called Exact, the Exact framework that I invented and created, and happy to talk more about it. And that framework has allowed us to predictably produce SEO campaigns that at scale that will move the needle up and to the right for whether it's local business, whether it's an e-commerce brand, whether it's a B2B company, any type of business will benefit from this approach.
Maybe let's delve straight into the Exact framework. So how does that look like?
Yes. So the Exact framework, it's a holistic SEO framework. It essentially understands that Google is not looking for any one specific thing. There are multiple components to its algorithm, right? It can't so simply be manipulated. And this aspect of it, which is that it's multidisciplinary, signal driven, is part of the strength of it. And so Exact stands for XACT. X stands for user experience, user behavior, the signals that they're measuring through Chrome and through the Google search, like the SERP result page, they're studying what we're doing when we're scrolling. Do we click on what's in position 1? Do we skip it and go to position 4 and click on that? And what's our dwell time? And do we hit the back button? All these things are part of their decision making about what lays out in the SERP. So that's X, okay? A, that's the next one. XACT, XA. A stands for authority. Authority in the world of Google is driven by backlinking heavily, the backlinks that you have. And the way that we build backlinks is we get other websites, especially websites that are reputable, that have notoriety, to link to our website. And so when they do that, they pass some of their authority to us. If we can build backlinks on high quality websites and those references from their sites to our sites are relevant from pages that are aligned topically to what our website is about, that helps increase our authority. So far, so good?
Yeah.
Okay. And the last two, CT, right? So C is content and T is technicals. Content, text on the page, we can get into it more, but there's a very objective way that they evaluate the quality of that text. And T would be technicals, that's the invisible content on the page, the HTML that is not visible. Like your heading tags, your meta tags, your schema markup, your internal linking dynamics, your sitemap, these components of the site. And that's the technicals. All four of those together, XACT, UX and behavior, authority, content, and technicals, that essentially constitutes the full holistic SEO framework. Local SEO is actually a little bit of a part of that, but it has a separate ranking methodology. But essentially, that is the equation. And so as we've gone deeper and deeper into it, we've taken the framework and we've expressed it as a mathematical equation, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. These components that all come together that fall into those 4 buckets allow us to predict rankings. And we can actually fairly accurately predict, if we take a list of 100 web pages, what their order will be in the rankings, right? It's hard for us to measure UX and behavior for sites we don't control because we can't see their dwell time. We can't see their behavior, right? And the historical patterns of what people have clicked on, but we're able to reverse engineer the content quality, what we call PQ, page quality. We've reverse engineered that algorithm with a product called Scholar. And that allows us to really evaluate the content quality. And then with technicals, we can grade those technicals very easily. And with authority, we actually have a metric called domain power that's very different than the metrics that come from other conventional, I would say more legacy SEO tool companies like SEMrush and Ahrefs and Moz. It's a different methodology that's based on traffic, and it's far more predictive of rankings. And so anyways, that's our framework, and that's how it works.
Mm-hmm. What would you say? Let's say we have 100 companies. Everybody's following that exact framework, right? Mm-hmm. Who ultimately will win the SEO race? If you can even say someone wins the SEO race.
So the framework is a kind of a thought process, the way that you understand how to develop an SEO strategy, but executing it is a very different thing. It's something like, imagine I gave you a Porsche 911 and then I also have a Porsche 911. Who's going to win the race? Well, who's the better race car driver? Who is more fearless? Who understands the racetrack and the conditions? And, so everyone will have a little bit of a different approach.
I see. That makes sense. What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions, not maybe when it comes to the exact framework, or what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you see agencies come to you with, or like even in the B2B space, that maybe we pull all our efforts and resources into content strategy where maybe that doesn't even make sense at this stage right now?
I see so many misconceptions. And to be fair, I've also been guilty of some of these in the past. So I'm not trying to knock on anyone because we're all learning, right? One of the things that I see often is when we inherit clients from other agencies, I look at the content strategy that they've developed and I see so much bad content on the website. And this is, we talked a bit about HubSpot and what happened to them. But when people create content on their website that is too diverse or too disconnected from what they're actually selling and what their actual product is, that's called topical signal dilution. You can actually totally mess up someone's rankings by publishing irrelevant content to their website. And I see agencies make this mistake of publishing content just to get clicks. For example, let's take one of our clients. We have a client in Beverly Hills, California, and they're a cardiologist, one of the top cardiologists in the area. And one of their internal SEOs decided to publish an article about Donald Trump and a heart attack that he had. The number one keyword that they had at the time was a keyword about Donald Trump heart attack. And they're like, hey, this is a heart attack related keyword. We think it's a great keyword and we get traffic for it. And we're like, no, you don't want that keyword on your website because you're associating with Google this idea of Donald Trump and a heart attack with your domain, not the actual service of cardiology, of cardiologist, of the locality of Beverly Hills. None of that content was built up on the website. And so sometimes it can be an uphill battle to convince people to prune content that they have and tell them this is no good, it's going to hurt you. When their traffic is in decline, when it's finally falling, at that time they'll listen because that's when they get the fear of God, right? They see Google, the God, pushing their rankings down, their traffic's falling, and now they're having a bad time. At that time they'll listen. But sometimes when they're early on in that process, they have a harder time listening. I think that's one of the most common mistakes, but there's so many of them. So I see some people just trying to build backlinks on the same sites. So they're able to get a backlink from their friend's website, and their backlink strategy is, I'll just get another backlink and another backlink and another backlink from that site. Well, turns out that there's a logarithmic equation that we found in one of the patents that actually shows us how they dampen backlink signals from domains. And the more you get from a domain, and also the older the backlinks are, there's a decay, right? And so there's a significantly diminishing return to getting more backlinks from the same website. So that's why, that strategy doesn't work. You have to go and get diverse backlinks from multiple sites. So that's just another common misconception. Now, what misconceptions have you heard, or are there any theories that you've wondered about?
I mean, now with the dip, with the big discussion that happened on X, especially on X with the whole HubSpot thing, with the traffic decline, that everybody says, well, it's over with SEO. Nobody needs SEO anymore. Let's jump over to PPC. So, but the thing is, every method has its pros and cons, right? But I think with SEO, it's more like people, and especially agencies, they believe like a ton of content will make SEO work, where they have actually no strategy behind content to begin with. So
And probably no case study. Like, if you haven't done it before and seen a big traffic pop, why are you so sure of your strategy? You have to like learn in the lab. I recommend every SEO have like as many websites as they can where they test. Test your theories on your own sites, not your client sites, on your own sites. Learn about what works, learn about what doesn't work. And also, not have hubris. I mean, there are people that I learned from. I've got, my friends like Koray Tugwert-Gabor and Irfan Azimi and different people that I learned from that have great insight and try to like improve my thinking. When it comes to content, if you don't understand how to make content that has factuality in it and deliberately creating content that evokes specific factual signals for Google, that's a big missing piece. A lot of people's content understanding of how Google evaluates content. You have to make sure you put a lot of factuality into your content because Google's extracting them. They're called triples. Another thing that they're looking for is human effort. So in the content you're creating, where are the images, right? You need images in there. And also not just AI images that have no metadata, like images that actually have those, they're called EXIF data, markup inside the image. Like Google's looking at that. Or even lists and tables and semantic HTML. Like putting all this into your content is actually very important. And if anyone is watching this and they're thinking like, well, that's interesting. There's a couple things about content that I didn't know about. There's essentially a training that I did on YouTube. It's about Scholar, SCOHALAR. It's a product we built, and it's a semantic SEO grader. And if you're interested in learning how Google grades content, just watch that video. We've actually given a product that reverse engineers their algorithm, and it's a very technical talk, but it explains the math and the science of that equation and how it works.
Yeah. You mentioned SEMrush and Ahrefs earlier, Manick. The question is like, do you have special insights as someone who builds software into like how Google actually works? Or is this kind of a mystery for a lot of people, including yourself?
Great. So I try to be honest and like, I'm a humble guy because, there's always a day where you'll learn the limits of your own knowledge. And I try to be hyper vigilant and aware of my gaps. And what I'll say is that I feel that I significantly can understand and predict how Google will behave if I do something to a website. Like I feel at this point that we've done so many case studies, over 1,000, that there's a high degree of pattern recognition now that we have. However, I don't have a 100% absolute knowledge of how Google will behave in a particular context, like or in a micro term. I know long term what strategies will work to move the needle up and to the right, but in the short term, in like a 2-week basis, it's harder to fully understand. And I think not even Google engineers understand it because it's a black box, and it's not easy to predict exactly why black box does this or that. But that said, there is a math equation behind it, and we understand the equation quite well. There are circumstances in that equation where there are different signals they're paying attention to, and it's not always clear which signal trumps the other signal. This is probably very abstract for listeners, but as you get into it and you do these tests, you realize that there are cases and conditions where what you believed to be true in all of your historical examples where you've done it can sometimes not be true for various reasons. And so I would say no one can be fully predictive of what Google will do, not even Google themselves. But that's okay, right? As long as in the long haul, in like the 3-month term, that we're able to know that this is what this site really needs to move its rankings up and to the right and give Google what they're looking for. That is, I think, the most essential task when it comes to SEO.
Yeah. One of the questions we probably get when it comes to SEO quite a lot, especially in the B2B space, is let's say there is a highly competitive space. Already you're competing for a specific keyword. Let's say in the engineering space, it would be CFD, so computational fluid dynamics, for example.
Okay.
What would your strategy be when it comes to B2B, telling a company, I don't know, do this strategy in order to compete against this highly competitive keyword with a lot of search volume?
Okay, so obviously, the first thing that I would do is I would put in that keyword into Google myself, and I would develop some intuition around how Google's looking at it. And I'd look at the things that are in bold. I'd look at the terms that I'm seeing, and I kind of have my own in my brain machine learning model of like what I'm seeing. I have like an intuition for it at this point. But essentially, the campaign that I would build and strategize would be going back to that holistic foundation, because it's always rooted in that. The things that I would pay attention to are when it comes to CFD, it's CFD, right? Computational
CFD,
fluid
correct.
dynamics. I'm not very familiar with that term, but the first thing that I would do is I would understand that this business, if you want to rank for computational fluid dynamics, and it's a competitive term, right? I would understand that this website that I'm building needs to become an expert in that domain of study and create what we call domain knowledge networks. A domain knowledge network is essentially a collection of what some people call topic maps or topical maps. And essentially, it starts with what's called the primary topic or central entity. People call it different things, but essentially, computational fluid dynamics may be the central entity of what this business offers. And what I would do is I would understand the ontology of information that exists around that core. And I would come up with a content strategy to essentially create that domain knowledge network to show Google that this business is an expert in computational fluid dynamics and all of these topics that are related to that central topic, essentially, and devise that content plan. That is a central component of any strategy, is delivering to Google the domain knowledge network for that website. The other things that I would do is I would look at what are some publishers that are related to this area of study, so this aspect of science, and I would outreach them, and I would aim to build and publish content on their websites around this topic that would link back to my site, so I can build up my topical backlink profile on websites that are as relevant as possible to this niche. So I would improve my backlinks as well. And then I'd run a technical audit through a site auditor like the one we have in SearchAtlas. You could use SEMrush and Ahrefs too for that as well. The reason that I prefer ours is that we have a one-click repair button. So any issue you find in the audit, instead of having to go and give it to your web developer, you just install our JavaScript technology into the site, click one button, and it will repair the issues that it finds. So it makes the technical SEO much faster. That would be kind of how I approach it.
When it comes to the content strategy, Manick, how will you approach this topic of a content strategy?
So we've been building, and this is taking, it's a labor of love, a journey that's been taking us almost 9 months now of daily grind and work, is trying to build a AI model that is able to construct these domain knowledge networks and content plans algorithmically, right? The cool thing about it is that this idea of computational fluid dynamics, even though I'm a stranger to it, the large language models are not a stranger to it, right? They already understand the ontology of information around this topic. However, they even have their limits about how much information they have. And so what we do in our approach is we start by building this topical map. We look for the footprints of human exploration around the subject, which are essentially keywords, right? The footprints of what we're looking for online are our keyword search history, right? So there's a history, a pattern of what people are searching for related to computational fluid dynamics. We just have to simply extract and find that data. And so, you can use keyword exploration tools like the ones that we have and others to get those query networks and construct them. Those query networks are important because we want to give them to the LLM so the LLM knows the specific topics that people are searching for, because it doesn't really know that information. It just has been trained on text from the internet about these topics, but they don't really know what people are looking for. They don't have that data. So we would want to RAG that information in so that the large language model has a disposition toward the topics that people are searching for. Okay. And then I'd also bring in new factuality. what's interesting is the large language models are not trained on copyrighted material. So any book that's been published, perhaps that the watch book, the Rolex watch book you have in the background there, right? It doesn't have the information inside that book. So if you were writing about Rolex watches and you wanted to really create content that stood out, what I would do is I would go and buy that copyrighted material and I would train my large language model with all of this new information that it doesn't have access to, right? All this new factuality, all this new history, all these interesting factoids that are now going to be embedded into this trained LLM, right? If you're with me so far, I'm just adding in all these nutrients essentially into the large language model to train it and get it to really become an expert in this field of study. And then from that place, the topical map and the domain knowledge network that it's able to construct according to very specific instructions and rules and framework will be very robust. And that's actually how we do it. That's the first step, is building that domain knowledge network. And it's sort of the content plan that we're going to go on. And then we build each node, each document one by one.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'm wondering, this is not probably a part of SEO. It's probably like generative AI optimization, which is kind of the next step, like manipulating LLMs to be able to appear in search queries from people who might be using ChatGPT, for example, like Google. Is there some ways or some kind of best practices that you have seen across all the case studies that you've worked on, where you can explicitly manipulate these LLMs to be able to appear in these queries when people ask for specific information, let's say about flow around the car, and then maybe something would pop up in terms of CFD, where we as a company then appear in that search query or in the search result. Is that possible nowadays?
It is. And this is actually the future of SEO, or as we call it, AEO, answer engine optimization. There are new frontiers. People have been way too focused on one search engine for too long, which is just Google. And now we're waking up and realizing, well, what about YouTube? YouTube is an incredibly powerful search engine, right? Like number 2 search engine. So also there's optimization for that. Bing has become way more important because Bing search results are embedded into OpenAI through the search feature. So now discoverability on Bing influences our position in the large language model. So now we also should be thinking about our rankings on Bing. And then as you point out, we've got ChatGPT and Claude and these LLMs and how they're producing information. So what do we do? And we've done a lot of study, and obviously there's always more to do here. But what we've learned is these large language models get their data from a few different sources. One of those sources is the Common Crawl Web Corpus of Information, which is a free data set hosted on Amazon S3 that they're trained on. Essentially, LLMs can just take that Common Crawl data set and import it in and learn from it. So if you want to be found in LLMs, you need to make sure you're in that Common Crawl data corpus. One of the things that many people don't know is, like, has Common Crawl ever crawled my site? Right? A lot of people don't know which crawlers are hitting their website because they're not doing log file analysis. Why? Because log file analysis makes me want to gouge my eyes out if you do it the old way, which is getting your server log files from your Apache Nginx log files, pulling them out of the server, and then putting them in and analyzing them. And then after you analyze it today, you want new data in like 2 weeks, so then you have to pull it again. It sucks. So we actually figured out that we could do that by analyzing the HTTP request patterns of people in the browser. And so now we can actually figure out if those crawlers have hit your site ever, just through installing our JavaScript, right? So that helps a lot to see, are we even attracting the attention of the OpenAI bot or the Claude bot or the Apple bot or the Bing bot or the Common Crawl bot? And so when we have that data, usually the data tells us one thing, which is we're not getting their attention enough, right? So then what else can we do? And that's enter news sites. All these LLMs, they love consuming high quality information on news sites. But getting our story, our business, right, like this car fluid dynamic, the laminar surfaces of the cars and stuff, and how we analyze it, getting that story into the news sites, that's not trivial, right? A journalist somewhere has to say, hey, this information makes sense. I want to write about it. It's newsworthy. It's interesting. It's valuable. And so it seems like a daunting task. but there are creative ways, like through press releases, that we can push our content into the LLMs. And so that is a very powerful strategy, is figuring out what sites are on Google News, what sites are newsy websites that the LLMs have indexed, and reaching out to those websites. And so, of course, we built a little product around this. It's called Quest. It stands for something. It's an acronym. All these products are acronyms, but what it essentially does is it basically interrogates the LLM and asks it, OpenAI, where did you get that information from? Right? You ask it a question about that car fluid dynamics thing. Where did
Yeah.
you get this information from? What's your source? Right? And it asks it hundreds and hundreds and thousands of questions around the subject and figures out from the interrogation all of its data sources, all of its websites it got the data from. And then what you can do is you can outreach those sites to get your website referenced in the root articles that were used to train the LLM, or you can try to get a new piece of content published on that website that tells your story, and eventually the LLM will index that content anew, and you should be able to get your story into the LLM. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. That's super cool that you built so much stuff. Actually, Manick, it's super interesting to see. I'm wondering, Ahrefs and SEMrush and all the other competitors that you guys have, they're not building that stuff, if I'm not
No,
mistaken.
no, not really. I think that we've gone off on this weird direction with search and PPC technology that is kind of unique to ourselves. We don't really look at ourselves as a competitor of theirs because we just have a different vision for where the space is going and what we want to build to really move the needle. We're less into reporting technology. I think I greatly admire what they built. Honestly, the fact that you can use such a technology for $100 is insane. Think about what they've done, like scraping the internet at this scale, massive scale, bringing order to all the chaos and all the unknown information out there. It's really an incredible thing that we have access to tools like this and that they're so affordable. However, we have this vision of not building reporting software. We want to build software that actually gets results and helps people move the needle on business outcomes. And
Yeah.
so that fork in the road led us in a totally different path.
That makes sense. I'm wondering, from a content standpoint, can you give some recommendations on AI generated content and how much of AI we should use? Probably there's no rule of thumb when it comes to content generation, but what would you advise people to do when they work heavily on SEO and invest resources into SEO? Use ChatGPT, yes or no, or 70%? What would you recommend?
So I probably have a slightly radical take on this, which is that I believe AI can create human quality content without human review. A lot of people are gonna go, whoa, like no way, and hate that, and that's good. Like we should have multiple perspectives around this, but I believe that the state of AI is at a place today, right now in this moment, that it can outcompete human effort because humans fundamentally were lazy, right? Even writers that are creating content, there is a laziness there where they don't want to have to go the extra mile. So I believe AI can actually create better content than humans. However, not your AI in ChatGPT where you're just plugging in a couple things, the way I described it, where we're getting facts from books and we're getting the query history from Google, and we're basically building a very enriched environment in which we're generating content. I do believe that AI is capable of doing exceptionally well at this, but you have to be able to combine models. You have to be able to combine data sets. You have to be able to include image generation and video generation to create the highest quality landing page experience that you possibly can. And so the truth is that for most people, they're going to have a human component to this. And so if you're going to have, like, unless you're going to spend the effort and time to build that fine-tuned model and to build the specific instructions, just find really good writers and hold them to a high standard and run their content that they're producing through a page quality simulator like Scholar to evaluate what is the quality of the content that they're producing. Don't just let them publish on your blog without paying attention to those quality scores, because what will happen is a month from now, you may go back and realize we just wasted the resources, the time, the opportunity cost of publishing really bad content. And if you're listening to this and you're saying, I also believe that AI can create better than human content, if you have that belief and you want to go deeper into creating high quality AI generated content and you want to go in that direction, well, we do talk about our research around this and how we built some of the models that we've built to get the highest level quality through AI. And I've described a lot of the approaches on the podcast so far. There's more to share. I didn't get too technical because I don't want to bore people too much unless they're interested in that. But I do talk about it in our webinars. We have these SEO theory biweekly webinars, and we're talking about these subjects and posting some of the research to YouTube as well. So if you're interested in that, just check out some of my other videos.
Yeah, you have really great YouTube content, which I'll obviously also share in the description of this podcast. So really great stuff people should check out.
Thank you.
When it comes to SEO 2025 and beyond, do you have kind of maybe 3 to 5 tips for people who want to maybe become better at SEO? What things to look out for in 2025 and beyond?
Okay, totally. The first thing I would suggest is look up the definition of humble and be humble, right? If you've had a great year for your SEO and things are going really well, don't expect that can happen forever. I see a lot of content out there that can rank on Google or rank like decently well for low search volume keywords that I don't think will be around in a year, right? So if you've done, and you honestly know kind of in your heart of hearts that the content you put out there is low quality, well, today in this moment, make a commitment to actually spend the time to build one really, 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 3 reallys, really good piece of content and see if you can get just one page to rank exceptionally well on Google, right? Just one really good piece of content. Start with that and understand the journey to get there, and then work on the second and the third, right? Learn from people that specialize in semantic SEO. Look at some of my content, but I would recommend like just focus on building one really good piece of content instead of 1,000. Is I think important, because then you learn what you need to do to build at that high level, right? So that's one prediction. The second prediction is that we're going to see YouTube play a outsized role in actually really authentic storytelling. There's just something about people and the way that we communicate or the way that we consume video content. You know that I'm a real person here in my office in Medellin, Colombia. I know you're a real person, right? You're not a Hey Gen avatar, right? We're real people having a real conversation. There's an authenticity to this. We've seen in digital marketing, and I'm curious, Yusuf, if you've seen this as well, that ads in certain industries don't work as well as they used to, right? People won't buy a product just from presenting them an ad, right? In one context. If you're only visible in this one ad channel, your conversion rate won't be very good, or your retention rate won't be very good, because people don't have this omni-channel experience of you as a brand. So don't just go into one channel SEO, go into all channels, build an authentic narrative online with YouTube, with community, with SEO, with Google ads, with meta ads, and be everywhere so that your audience will find you in all channels. And then you'll see the conversion rates actually across all channels go up and the CAC go down. So be omni-channel. Even though I'm an SEO guy, I'm really a search guy. I love Google and all Google platforms. I've studied those most extensively, but I believe omni-channel, and we take an omni-channel approach with our brand. So that's like another big tip that I'd say. And then the last thing I want to touch on is that I expect that the ranking factor model is going to shift and change. I expect that Google is going to actually go back to off-page signals. And I think that there's going to be a nerfing, kind of like a muting of some of the topical authority signals as they become more easily taken advantage of by people. I think Google's going to dial them back a little bit, and they're going to dial up the off-page signals. That's just my personal perspective about what I think will come in the next 1 year.
Got it. You talked a little bit about ads, Manick. You also built a product around ads, right? Google Ads?
We did, correct? Yes. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, what it actually does for businesses?
For sure. So as an ads guy, as a recovering Google Ads campaign builder, I lost some hair here and there from building these ad campaigns because it's tedious work, right? Creating clusters. I would say with ads, there's kind of like there's maybe even more than two, but I think about it as kind of two approaches. Some people have a strategy where they they run broad match campaigns and they just basically suck in a bunch of keyword traffic and then they add negatives. Does that sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Right? They add negatives and they say, not that, not that, not that, but they want to just let this campaign pull in a bunch of keyword traffic, and they're kind of a little bit lazy, because doing it that way, I think, is a little bit lazy, right? Because you're buying bad clicks that you could have avoided to begin with, and you're just sort of just spraying and praying and getting and then deleting the stuff that you don't like. You waste budget this way. Early campaign performance is never very good, and I think the campaign structure is worse than it could be. The alternative is to cluster your keywords with their search intent and semantics. So, like in your example, and when we describe the ontology of that topic, what we would do is we would build these highly clustered and very narrow ad groups that are focused and specific, and hundreds of them. And so when we build ad campaigns, we upload ad campaigns with thousands of keywords in them, with exact match targeting, with broad match targeting. And so essentially what we've done with AI is we've taken this methodology, which is not that commonly used because it honestly is kind of sucks. It takes a long time. It takes like, to do the work to build such ad campaigns, 69 hours in one test, 102 hours in another test, like very, very backbreaking kind of work. But because it's generative AI and we can automate it, it's way faster. And so we've taken the single themed ad group approach with AI to construct very large ad campaigns that are very granular. And so, one, you get the benefit of a highly structured ad campaign design. Two, you get the benefit of really good CTR, because the ad copy that you're putting out there in your ads is super aligned to that keyword cluster and the intent behind it. And so you just get higher CTR. And then the third benefit is that when you're bid managing, when you're managing this portfolio of ads, that it's much easier to modify them, because every one of them is kind of neatly packaged, and you can turn them up or turn them down programmatically in a much easier way. So it becomes easier to do ad portfolio optimization.
Mm-hmm.
And that product is called Auto Google Ads, by the way.
I see. I think the audience would be interested in, does it also work kind of for local strategies, meaning like you have I don't know, 30 to 50 bucks a day, for example, or does it only work if you spend like 10 grand plus a month?
Great question. We trained it, and when we built it, that was a key use case that we were focused on, were local businesses. And so a lot of the people that have been testing and using it this week were using it for local businesses like lawyers and dentists and plumbers. And what's great about it is usually those business owners, what's their budget for ad campaign management? It's not going to be 10K a month, right?
Yeah.
These are small businesses and they can't afford that level of PPC management fee. So most of them are spending between $500 and $1,000 a month to manage those type of campaigns, right? And so when you're only making that much money, you can't spend 50 hours to build them an ad campaign that's the best, most pristine, most targeted ad campaign. You can't, but now you can. And so it works beautifully for them too. And, we've seen for some of those campaigns, conversion rates of like 90% conversion rate, like crazy, because it's so targeted, the keywords that are being bid on and the alignment to that local business's service offering. And so amazing results for those local campaigns and local clients, because no one is doing that type of ad campaign design for them.
If two same businesses compete for the same keyword and they use your tool, then probably the one who has more budget would win in this race, right? Theoretically.
I think it's going to come down at that point, not on the ads. It's going to come down to the landing page and the brand storytelling and the quality of the CRO that they've done and design on that page. And then let's not forget, the lead comes in, and what happens with a lot of businesses? They don't call them. They don't call them quickly, right? They don't follow up with them. They call them one time and then they never touch them again. So there are other aspects of the business side that end up mattering so much more. But once you get past the ad campaign creation, and that's the part that needs to be optimized next.
Got it. How can people find out more about SearchAtlas?
Well, if you know how to use a web browser, just pop in SearchAtlas.com. You can also jump over to YouTube, and you can find me and my content to learn a little bit more about our mission, our research, what we're doing. And if you're interested in learning more about it, please join one of our webinars where we just teach the community about SEO and best practices, and pretty easy to find online and get in touch with.
Awesome, Manick. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Yusuf. This has been super fun.